Our cover story tonight comes from Helsinki, the capital of Finland, where a Trump-Putin Summit took place. The two leaders held a one-on-one interaction. The interpreters for both of them were present, but their advisors were kept away from this interaction. This format only added unpredictability to the outcome of this meeting. It was supposed to last for 90 minutes. It lasted well over 2 hours. Both leaders emerged out of the meeting room after a conversation that went beyond the stipulated time, and then they held a press conference. Listen in to the first reactions.
Constructive dialogue between the United States and Russia affords the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics.
If we join the ranks and work together, hopefully we will reach this understanding with our American partners. Today's negotiations reflected our joint wish with President Trump to redress this negative situation in the bilateral relationship, outline the first steps for improving this relationship to restore the acceptable level of trust and going back to the previous level of interaction on all mutual interests issues.
It was a one-of-its-kind press conference. The Russian president, as you can see in those pictures, was asked if the ball, as far as the Syria situation was concerned, was in his court. In response, this is what he did. He handed over the ball to the American president, saying the ball is now in your court. And Donald Trump then tossed it to his wife, Melania Trump, saying, Melania, here you go.
That's very nice. That will go to my son, Barron. We have no question. In fact, Melania, here you go. Okay.
The final question. And before the press conference began, a reporter was taken out of the venue. So it was dramatic, it was full of controversy, and there's a lot of expectation. The stakes are very high, while the president of the US might brag and boast of being the king of deals. Today's meeting with President Vladimir Putin sees the scales tilted in favor of the latter, the Russian president. Our next report explains how this summit in Helsinki was a geopolitical victory for the Russian leader.
Now they're saying it with Putin. Well, Putin is highly prepared, and Trump, will he be prepared for the meeting? Trust me, we'll do just fine. We'll do just fine.
With this declaration, the American president expressed his confidence before his meeting with his Russian counterpart. It is a summit that has invited a backlash for President Trump, both at home and abroad. But for the man on the other side of the table, it is being seen as a massive victory. With a $12 billion image makeover stunt in the name of the Football World Cup having successfully been executed, President Putin now hopes to secure another victory.
The President of the United States is treating us with the respect that we deserve. That in itself is a win from the summit, even if no other type of agreements come out of it. Putin has a much lower bar for a really successful summit than the United States does, because at the end of the day, just that handshake and that smile and that respect gives him huge dividends and huge benefits for the many audiences that he plays to.
And why not? The two nations, after all, have been long-standing adversaries. There have been charges of Russian meddling in the American polls. The situation has also been tense after charges of a Novichok attack carried out on a Russian double agent in the United Kingdom, one that created ripples across the globe. The two nations do not see eye to eye when it comes to the ongoing conflict in Syria. While the US has been accused of tacit support to the rebels in the war-torn nation, Putin and his men have backed the Assad-led government. Washington and Moscow have also had a fallout after Russia's annexation of Crimea around 4 years ago. And thus the meeting is keeping experts on the tenterhooks. Reports in the American media claim that veteran national security hands are so worried that Trump will be outmaneuvered by the former KGB agent that they are praying that nothing at all comes out of this summit. The fears are not unfounded. The tone of the meet was set way before it even began. President Putin kept Trump waiting for over an hour before the summit began. The two leaders have met twice before and spoken over a hotline over 8 times. But with the ties between the two nations at an all-time low, there are more eyes waiting and watching every move that the American president makes. Bureau Report, WION.
So why should the Putin-Trump talks in Helsinki matter so much to India? On the face of it, this meeting has nothing to do with New Delhi. No direct gains for India. But there's more to it than meets the eye. Better relations between Washington and Moscow may have a positive fallout elsewhere in areas where India has interests. For instance, Russia's proximity to China is a matter of concern to India. This flows directly from the estrangement between Washington and Moscow. They've had differences over a range of issues, including Putin's decision to occupy and annex Crimea 4 years ago. This resulted in American sanctions. Russia's support of the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria is another point of contention. Russia's support for Iran's role in Syria. And of course, American allegations of Russia meddling in its elections. The result has been sanctions. They've hit Russian markets hard. They've dented the ruble and they've sent shares of key public sector firms in Russia plummeting. Moscow has been forced to move closer to Beijing then. In the process, it has built relations with Pakistan. Russia has shifted its diplomatic position on Afghanistan, essentially backing Pakistan's line. Moscow is now talking to the Taliban, and rumor has it that it may even be arming the Taliban. What does all of this mean for India? It means that India may no longer be in a position to count on Russia's support to balance off other powers such as the US and China. In the event of a confrontation with China, India may not get Russia's backing. It also directly impacts India's military. An estimated 70% of the weaponry used in India is of Russian origin. Supply of spares could become a problem. Timely maintenance support for India's fleet of Russian submarines may be delayed. Agreements on new arms deals may not happen. So there are potential challenges going forward. There's also CAATSA. That's Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CAATSA. It's been mandated by the US Congress. Sanctions will apply to any country that buys Russian military equipment. So if India buys the S-400 Triumph missile defense system from Russia, American sanctions will follow. American officials have reportedly told India to put off this purchase of the S-400 by at least 1 year. They're hoping for the atmospherics to improve in Washington, but the S-400 is vital for India's defense. One S-400 regiment can secure Delhi from any missile attack. If India is to deploy the system on time, the final set of agreements must be done as soon as possible. Only when the agreements are done will Russia begin production and then the deliveries subsequently. If Trump and Putin are able to hammer out a consensus on some of these key differences, it may have a positive fallout in other areas. It may become easier for American administration officials to persuade the Congress there to give India a waiver from sanctions for buying the S-400. The US may relax sanctions against Russia, which may persuade Putin to step back from his close embrace of China. India gains both ways. And that is why this Helsinki summit is very important for New Delhi. Since the Cold War, Russia and the US have been on the opposite sides of the spectrum. Both Trump and Putin seem to be part of forging the new ties, this new equation between the US and Russia. Apart from the key issues on the table, the personal chemistry, some say, between the two leaders is going to be in focus. A lot has been said about it, how they're an odd couple in terms of their temperament and style. They couldn't be any more different. Vladimir Putin is never caught off guard in public. And Donald Trump is known to speak off the cuff. Putin is off social media. He does not even own a smartphone, reportedly. The Kremlin often relies on domestic media to spread the president's opinion. In contrast, Donald Trump puts his opinions out on social media. While the Russian president rarely shows his displeasure in public, maybe raise an eyebrow to express his emotion, his American counterpart is often caught angrily contradicting his own advisors in public, sometimes even himself. Another big difference between the two world leaders is that Vladimir Putin is up to date with intelligence agencies' reports and press summaries. Donald Trump's advisors reportedly struggle to get him to read even the shortest of briefings. There is, as we said, a world of difference between these two leaders. And even before Donald Trump landed in Helsinki, he was in London. So we'll also dwell for a bit on Britain's favourite obsession, the royal family, and what the US president did there. His visit to Windsor was carefully watched by his supporters and critics alike. While few expected him to follow all protocols during his first visit to Britain, they did not anticipate that he'll break it twice, with the Queen no less. It shouldn't really matter. The world has bigger fish to fry, but we'll come to that later. First, let's tell you what happened in London. There were two complaints against Donald Trump. One, that him and the First Lady, they did not bow before the Queen of England. And the second, that the US President walked in front of the Queen. After this event, royal commentators in the West were quick to slam Donald Trump for his lack of preparedness. One even described this meeting as, quote-unquote, complete mayhem. We beg to differ. What's the point of so-called royal protocol in this day and age? These monarchs are mere figureheads. Too bad they're trapped in the colonial past. Why must the rest of the world conform, we ask? The expectation of a bow or a courtesy is out of date, but it does not stop there. While meeting the royals, there is a specific set of rules to be followed. They call it protocol. Like who can speak first? Where should one look? How should one address the royals? How to stand? Even how to sit? These practices date back to the time when these monarchs were treated like gods and accorded an almost divine status. But in a democracy, is there really a place for these practices that are a reflection of inherited power and privilege? The royals of Britain are highly secretive. Their interactions with the government of the day happen behind the curtains and away from the public eye. The British government picks up the check for this monarchy's official expenditure. It's called the sovereign grant. According to one report, the true cost, the real cost of the royal family to the British taxpayer is more than £300 million every year. That's nearly 10 times more of what the official numbers say. So has the monarchy lost its luster and is now little more than a burden on the common man? The answer is yes. The present responsibilities of the Queen of England reduce her to a mere figurehead. She cannot take a stand on any issue of public importance. If she does, it's of little consequence. There has not been any scrutiny of her role, nor has anything from her weekly audience with the Prime Minister been made public. But Donald Trump was quite happy with his meeting with the Queen. After leaving the United Kingdom, the US President was asked about it during an interview, and he said that he even discussed Brexit with the Queen.